Vamos a proceder a explicar que tenemos dos puertas a los lados y la salida es hacia la mano izquierda del lugar. Las personas que necesitan traducción simultánea ya se encuentran personas con los aparatitos para que ustedes puedan tener acceso a la traducción simultánea del evento del día de hoy. Todas las mañanas, a partir de las 8:30, pueden acceder al espacio, ubicar su aparato y estar preparados para inicio de la sesión. Las salidas de emergencia, de nuevo, se ubican al lado izquierdo. Los baños del lugar se ubican al lado derecho del complejo del Centro Nacional de la Cultura. Bienvenidos y muchas gracias.
We'll now explain about the safety protocol. Please be aware if there is to be an emergency, please exit to your left.
Muy buenos
We
días.
have radios, devices for the interpretation at the front desk, please. Request one if you need one. We'll have interpretation from English into Spanish and from Spanish into English. Thank you. Again, if we were to have an emergency, please follow instructions. Thank you.
Muy buenos días a todos y todas. Les damos la cordial bienvenida al Foro a acelerar la implementación de los compromisos internacionales para promover los derechos de los afrodescendientes para su reconocimiento, justicia y desarrollo. Muy buenos días a todos y todas, estimada señora vicepresidenta de la República de Costa Rica, Epsi Campbell-Barr, señor Harold Robinson, señora Alegra Bayochi. Le damos la cordial bienvenida a todas las personas acá presentes, tanto las personas acá presenciales como las personas que nos acompañan vía streaming. Les hacemos el recordatorio que nosotros estamos cumpliendo con todas las medidas protocolarias del Ministerio de Salud. La cordial bienvenida a todas y todas las personas acá presentes. Le damos también la bienvenida a Rey, que en este momento estará ingresando a las instalaciones. A Su Majestad Onedejo Wafo Okoto III, Rey de Akumu. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos al foro Acelerar la implementación de los compromisos internacionales para promover los derechos de las personas afrodescendientes para su reconocimiento, justicia y desarrollo. Le invitamos a la señora Vicepresidenta de la República, Epsi Campbell-Barr, a pasar al podio a darnos unas palabras de inauguración.
Muy buenos días. Muy buenos días. Pensé que estaban dormidos, pero no. Bueno, muchísimas gracias por estar. Ah, sí, claro. Gracias. Se escucha mejor. Primero que todo, muchísimas gracias por estar participando en la conmemoración del Día Internacional de las Personas Afrodescendientes y además por realmente iniciar este proceso para acelerar la implementación de los compromisos internacionales para promover los derechos humanos de las comunidades afrodescendientes, para el reconocimiento, la justicia y el desarrollo. Quiero agradecer de manera muy especial, pero muy especial, por la producción de un evento tan maravilloso como el de ayer. Es una actividad de esas que se llaman memorables, históricas, sentidas. Y quisiera realmente agradecer al productor de esa maravillosa actividad, don Álvaro Serrano, y todo el equipo que le apoyó. Y yo quisiera que a don Álvaro le demos un aplauso. Aquí lo tenemos, es él, es él. Realmente vivimos y vibramos anoche. Vibramos no solo nosotros y nosotras, vibramos con toda la energía de nuestros ancestros y nuestras ancestras ayer. Vibramos con la conexión directa hacia nuestra madre tierra, con el continente africano, no solo en la piel, sino en la presencia viva de quienes nos acompañaban el día de anoche. Y lo hicimos en un grupo pequeño porque realmente representábamos a millones de personas que esperan de nuestras acciones concretas para poder transformar las realidades. Y entonces nos reunimos anoche y nos vamos a reunir hoy, mañana, el jueves, mañana jueves y el viernes en Cahuita, para consolidar una serie de compromisos que en el caso nuestro pasan no solamente por las palabras, sino que pasan por el alma y por la cultura. Y por eso la actividad de conmemoración del Día Internacional de las Personas Afrodescendientes y de los pueblos negros del mundo no podía ser diferente. Tenía que estar plagado de canto, de poesía, de baile, de arte, de cultura, de corazón, porque así lo hicimos siempre, porque esas fueron herramientas para la liberación, porque a pesar de los obstáculos nuestra gente lloraba y bailaba, lloraba, bailaba y luchaba, porque a pesar de los obstáculos y a pesar de las injusticias inaceptables de la historia, construyeron desde el corazón y con el alma y con el espíritu y con la creatividad la liberación de nuestra gente. Y por esos y esas que están atrás, pero que nos ponen al frente su fuerza y su historia, es que tenemos que darle la cara a las generaciones futuras. Y por eso, doña Alegra Bayoki, muchas gracias por acompañarnos, por estar aquí. Por favor, lleve mi saludo personal y el del Gobierno de la República a la Deputy Amina Mohamed y al Secretario General Antonio Guterres, por el compromiso de seguir construyendo y caminando juntos. Don Harold, muchísimas gracias. Yo creo que la historia nos puso juntos en los lugares en donde estamos no por casualidad. No existe ninguna casualidad. y nos permitió a usted, a mí, a doña Natalia Kanem, a la que también quiero agradecerle profundamente el apoyo que ha dado el Fondo de Población, y ustedes en lo personal, porque la verdad es que estas cosas, uno puede tener 1000 puestos, si no tiene compromisos, de nada sirve el puesto, de nada sirve. Y creo que ustedes han demostrado eso, realmente un compromiso inclaudicable, muchísimo más allá de las responsabilidades que tenemos, y por eso, doña Alegra, usted desde el día número 1 está aquí trabajando hombro a hombro con nosotros y nosotras, y yo se lo agradezco profundamente. Quiero agradecerle a Fátima Chiari. Fátima, la embajadora representante permanente ante la Unión Africana de las Naciones Unidas, ella lideró un proceso con Costa Rica y nos permitió y nos ha permitido, Fátima, también junto con la embajadora del Chad, colocar los temas más importantes y esos puentes que necesitamos hacer con África. Hablaba yo con Amina hace menos de un mes sobre la necesidad de que hagamos una alianza entre las mujeres africanas y las mujeres afrodescendientes y que trabajemos y aprendamos entre nosotras, porque yo estoy totalmente convencida que la transformación que tenemos al frente pasa porque las mujeres asumamos un liderazgo absolutamente definitivo, que las mujeres realmente que tenemos por decisión, por naturaleza o por corazón, la verdad es que es un detalle eso, una mirada más compasiva, más responsable con el entorno. Quizá esa maravilla que la naturaleza nos da, de poder albergar la vida humana en nuestro cuerpo, nos da un sentido totalmente diferente, y ese sentido es el que tenemos que construir con los hombres comprometidos para hacer un mundo nuevo. Así que Fátima, muchísimas gracias por estar aquí, por venir, por acompañarnos, por construir estos puentes. Y por supuesto a Dorothy Davis. Dorothy es una maravilla que realmente tengamos la posibilidad de encontrarnos en un espacio como este espacio en el que estamos hoy. Yo desde que llegué a la vicepresidencia, pero no, la verdad es que no es desde que llegué a la vicepresidencia, ¿verdad? Quienes me conocen, estoy en esto de toda la vida, ¿verdad? Realmente le decía ayer a Sergia Galván que me acordaba, imagínense lo vieja que soy, que hace 25 años hicimos aquí el segundo encuentro de mujeres negras. Y bueno, yo era una jovencita que organizaba aquel encuentro en aquel momento, y reunimos a 115 mujeres de 25 países. La primera gran actividad internacional que realizábamos en Costa Rica. Estaban mis hijas pequeñas, y era tal aquella emoción que yo había planeado el discurso, no sé cuánto, y cuando empecé a hablar me ataqué a llorar. No pude con tanto. La presión de aquel tiempo. Estamos hablando de 1996. Para no recordar que en el 92, nosotras, un grupo de 3 mujeres costarricenses, afrocostarricenses, muchachitas, nos fuimos a República Dominicana al primer encuentro de mujeres negras. Y que desde hace bastante tiempo, porque es bastante tiempo, difundé y fundamos una organización de mujeres afrocostarricenses para tener la perspectiva de las mujeres en la lucha, en agenda feminista, en agenda de los derechos de los pueblos afrodescendientes. Entonces ustedes comprenderán que esto para mí es parte de mi misión de vida. Yo aquí no estoy por casualidad. Y yo sé que ninguno ni ninguna de ustedes que están hoy en esta sala están por casualidad, porque tenemos realmente una misión, gente, y hay que asumirlo así. O sea, una tiene que abrir espacios por donde quieren que en lo que esté. Hay alguna gente que está esperando detrás de nosotros y nosotras, que no lo pueden hacer. Esas criaturas, esos niños y niñas que hoy, afrodescendientes, que en cualquiera de nuestros países no tienen conectividad, no tienen agua potable, no tienen la posibilidad de ir a una escuela. O esas criaturas, niñas de 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 años, que por producto del abuso sexual están quedando embarazadas. Es por ellas que nosotras tenemos que matarnos. Cualquier cosa que nos pase no es nada, no es nada. Mire que a veces uno siente que la carga es pesadísima, por favor. Hay que pensar en esos y en esas que dependen del trabajo que nosotras hacemos. Y acelerar el compromiso significa hacer cosas así, desde la más pequeña hasta la más grande. Hasta la más grande. De manera que yo estoy muy contenta de que nos podamos juntar otra vez y que podamos reafirmar nuestros compromisos. De que podamos ir fuerte. Hablaba con Julio Huití, vamos a dejar instalado un grupo de trabajo para el Fondo de Desarrollo de los Pueblos Afrodescendientes. De aquí va a salir. Y vamos a aspirar no a lo poquito, porque necesitamos dinero también, invertir dinero en nuestras comunidades. Nosotros tenemos que empezar por 1 billón, 2 billones, 3 billones de dólares para empezar a hacer las cosas que nuestras comunidades necesitan. ¿Lo podemos lograr? Claro que lo podemos lograr. Hasta hace poco era imposible pensar en el Foro Permanente de Personas Afrodescendientes y teníamos 10 años dándole vuelta y vuelta y vuelta. Más de 10 años teníamos en eso. Y lo logramos. Y lo logramos. Así que el Fondo de Desarrollo para los Pueblos y Comunidades Afrodescendientes va a ser una realidad. ¿Y saben por qué va a ser una realidad? Porque lo vamos a asumir nosotros y nosotras. Porque vamos a dar esos primeros pasos, yo les llamo a esos, se lo copié a una persona que hace trabajo de fortalecimiento personal. Esos se llaman pasitos de bebé. O sea, uno tiene que dar los primeros pasos en todas las cosas porque si no, nunca puede correr. Si yo solo pienso y pienso en el Fondo de Desarrollo y pienso y sigo pensando en el Fondo para las personas afrodescendientes, si no hacemos nada, de fijo que no va a pasar nada. Pero si nosotros creamos el grupo de trabajo, empezamos a hacer una estrategia, damos los primeros pasos, todavía sin un 5 en la bolsa, pero con la certeza que lo vamos a hacer y seguimos caminando, lo logramos. Así que cuando hace 2 años firmamos en Costa Rica el compromiso de San José, realmente era para acelerar el cumplimiento de los derechos de las personas afrodescendientes. Y yo espero que en este foro podamos escuchar a Dorothy, a Fátima, a Harold, a Alegra, mirando qué son las cosas que tendríamos nosotros que hacer más, si hay que hacer más. Es probable que hay que levantarse más temprano y acostarse más tarde. Uno no ve en qué momento van pasando los años. Y entonces hay que aprovechar cada instante que tenemos. Y de aquí también vamos a salir con la propuesta de la coalición contra el racismo sistémico y por las reparaciones. Lo vamos a hacer. Y dentro de 2 o 3 años vamos a volver atrás y vamos a decir, vieron que lo logramos. ¿Por qué? Porque nos ponemos en la tarea, porque caminamos. Yo quiero agradecerle también a la Alta Comisionada de los Derechos Humanos, Michelle Bachelet, porque asumió el compromiso. Desde el primer día ha asumido el compromiso con nosotras. Y vieran qué interesante, porque hicimos un trío muy particular. La Alta Comisionada de los Derechos Humanos, doña Natalia, Kanem y esta servidora, 3 mujeres caminando. Y cuando se nos puso en el barco Amina Mohamed, yo dije, bueno, todo perfecto, vamos a caminar y vamos a hacer cosas maravillosas. Así que nosotros ayer firmamos un decreto de la Declaratoria de Interés Público de la Población Afrodescendiente. El presidente de la República lo firmó para generar una mesa de trabajo que nos va a llevar a declarar al pueblo afrodescendiente costarricense como pueblo tribal. Y eso es un paso fundamental. Todos nuestros pueblos en nuestros países tienen que garantizar tener el derecho de ser tratados como pueblos tribales, porque lo somos. Para que realmente nos cobije la convención, el convenio 169 sobre los pueblos indígenas y tribales. Y eso también es un avance realmente maravilloso. El Foro Permanente el foro permanente de las personas para las personas afrodescendientes. Eso es un espacio maravilloso porque es un espacio consultivo que nos va a permitir ahora sí hablar de verdad, porque tenemos como muchos mecanismos, a veces en las Naciones Unidas, pero son de tamaños muy pequeños y entonces no logramos empujar de la manera en que necesitamos nuestra agenda. Realmente muchas gracias por hacer el esfuerzo de venir. En tiempos de pandemia, moverse a un país como este, hacer el esfuerzo que están haciendo cada uno y cada una de ustedes, implica que tienen un compromiso inclaudicable. Hagámoslo con el corazón realmente más grande que podamos, no solo el nuestro. Pensemos en esa generación de personas pequeñas que esperan que nosotros hagamos más y que hagamos todo. Esas criaturas a las que tenemos de verdad que entregarles un mundo bueno, un mundo nuevo. Esos niñitos que hoy están, que no tengan realmente miedo, que cuando tienen 12 años o 13 años sean tratados como adultos, cuando no se les dieron los derechos de ser criaturas. O que puedan sentir el miedo y el pánico las mamás de que se los maten en la calle, porque la realidad que tenemos es tremenda. El informe de la Alta Comisionada sobre racismo sistémico y brutalidad policial es desgarrador. Nos matan a nuestros muchachos y algunas de nuestras muchachas por ser negros. Así como las mujeres inventamos el concepto de feminicidio, hay un concepto que se llama, no sé todavía yo cómo, pero que se le mata a uno por su color de piel, por su raza, por su identidad. Y es por eso que estamos aquí, porque yo igual sigo teniendo esperanza de futuro, a pesar de la dura realidad. Algunas personas consideran que no, demasiado esperanzadora, no estamos retrocediendo, me dicen alguna gente. Yo pienso que estamos avanzando. Yo pienso que estamos avanzando. Los avances no son lineales, nunca lo han sido, pero estamos avanzando. Los discursos que hoy escuchamos, la gente que nos acompañan en nuestras luchas, antes estábamos peleando como contra viento y marea, y lo vivimos nosotros mismos, gente de mi generación. Estamos avanzando, pero tenemos que correr. Tenemos que correr. Y bueno, yo espero que todos y todas aquellas que estén dispuestas a trabajar un poco en la propuesta de la coalición sobre racismo sistémico y por las reparaciones, puedan trabajar conmigo en un grupo de trabajo paralelo que tendremos para tener una aprobación de ese documento cuando terminemos en este foro, y el grupo de trabajo que va a trabajar por el Fondo de Desarrollo para los pueblos afrodescendientes también hagan una propuesta y inventen un espacio y empiecen a trabajar para que al último día tengamos esa propuesta consolidada y empecemos a caminar. Así lo hicimos antes, miren, lo hicimos sin estructura, ahora lo hacemos hasta con el apoyo de las instituciones internacionales, con un gobierno como el gobierno de Costa Rica, es más fácil. Antes era tocando la puerta, levantando las banderas, mirando, sacando citas que no nos daban. Y ahora es diferente. Entonces aprovechemos este momento y de verdad saquémosle provecho estos días en Costa Rica. Este país ha sido maravilloso. Mire que en el 96 hicimos el encuentro de mujeres afro, en el 2005 hicimos el encuentro de parlamentarios y parlamentarias afrodescendientes y fundamos el Parlamento Negro de las Américas. En el 2016 volvimos a juntar a los parlamentarios y parlamentarias. Hace 2 años hicimos la reunión de San José junto con el Fondo de Población. Este país nos ha dado la posibilidad de albergar, y antes habíamos hecho la alianza de líderes afro de América Latina antes de la conferencia de Durban y de Santiago. Ha sido lindo el país para albergarnos y para que aquí tengamos una cuna para hacer realmente las cosas que tenemos que hacer, no solo para Costa Rica, por supuesto, esto es para el mundo lo que estamos haciendo. Así que muchísimas gracias por estar, muchísimas gracias por compartir sus experiencias, pero más gracias porque estamos construyendo un músculo cada vez mayor para transformar lo que tenemos que transformar y para heredar definitivamente lo que tenemos que heredar. Ese mundo nuevo que no es solo para los y las afrodescendientes, ese mundo nuevo que es para los pueblos indígenas, para las comunidades rurales, para las mujeres que están atrás, ese mundo nuevo en el que vamos a tener el corazón abierto para compartirlo todo y para pensar realmente que todos los seres humanos somos absolutamente iguales y que podemos vivir sin discriminación, con derechos, con justicias, tener una vida digna y feliz. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, señora vicepresidenta. Dicho sea de paso, ella es la primera mujer afrodescendiente en ocupar este cargo en el continente americano, dirigente afrocostarricense, 2 veces diputada y ministra de Relaciones Exteriores y Culto en el 2018. Ella es investigadora y activista de los derechos humanos en temas relacionados con mujeres, pueblos indígenas, afrodescendientes, desarrollo humano, inclusión social y medio ambiente. Ha sido reconocida por la revista Forbes como una de las mujeres más poderosas de América Latina y el Caribe, por la revista Estrategia y Negocios como una de las mujeres más influyentes de la región, por la red Reconocimiento africano y de la diáspora como una de las líderes afrodescendientes con mayor relevancia en la región, y por la organización Most Influential People of African Descent como una de las mujeres con ascendencia africana más importante del mundo. Muchísimas gracias, querida vicepresidenta, por acompañarnos en este maravilloso evento. También les agradecemos a todas las personas que nos acompañan vía streaming, que les comento que tenemos más de 280 personas conectadas. Quiero invitar al podio al director regional para América Latina y el Caribe, al señor Harold Robinson Davis.
Buenos días a todas y a todos aquí presentes y también a quienes nos acompañan en streaming. Señora Epsi Campbell-Barr, primera vicepresidenta de la República de Costa Rica. Señora Fátima Kiari Mohamed, representante permanente de la Unión Africana ante Naciones Unidas. Su Majestad Odenejo Cuafo Akoto III, Rey de Akwamu, Ghana, Nana. Señora Dorothy Davis, Congressional Caucus Institute, y representante de Global African Diaspora, quien será la Keynote Speaker. Quisiera también reconocer muchas de las personalidades que están aquí y que estaban ayer, pero por no poder romper el protocolo no reconocimos. Pero creo que es importante para hacer un repaso del nivel de este evento. Bueno, también tenemos a la embajadora de Chad, a la embajadora Amo Aziza Burat el Chad. Tenemos también a la parlamentaria, a la diputada panameña Kaira Harding, que también es la vicepresidenta de la Asamblea Nacional de Panamá. Tenemos a la diputada Paola Cabezas Castillo. No tengo a todas y todos, pero tengo algunos. Ahí vamos a ir nombrándolos. Al diputado John Arley Murillo. Tenemos a Elvis Morris Donco de Ghana. Tenemos a la senadora Gloria Rodríguez también de Uruguay. Los alcaldes Jerry Sabio de Honduras, de La Ceiba. Viceministro de Cultura de Ghana, el honorable Mark Okraku Mante. Y y a otras múltiples distinguidas participantes en este evento. En algún momento podremos reconocer a todas las personas que están aquí. Nosotros nos complace de nuevo comenzar este foro como seguimiento a la celebración de ayer, siempre con la idea y la expectativa de que celebramos pero actuamos, porque no es suficiente celebrar, pero no tenemos que olvidarnos de celebrar. Entonces estos foros desde la perspectiva del Fondo de Población y junto con el trabajo que hacemos con la oficina de la Alta Comisionada para Derechos Humanos, representa la continuación de esa reactivación de la agenda afro, que desde el punto de vista de nosotros sucede mucho con el encuentro de San José, en donde después de muchos años se articulan las y diferentes actores y organizaciones para retomar esa agenda que de alguna manera se consideraba que no estaba avanzando de la forma que era. Hoy se inician estos foros y ya la vicepresidenta los definió su alcance y su objetivo, pero desde el punto de vista de nosotros en Naciones Unidas, representando también, aprovechando para mencionar a todo el sistema, se relaciona con el seguimiento de los compromisos adquiridos. Y sabemos los principales, ¿no es cierto? El plan de acción de Durban, el decenio Afrodescendientes. Desde el punto de vista del fondo, queremos tanto la declaración de San José, que se levantó y se llevó a la cumbre de Nairobi, que tiene su propio plan de acción y seguimiento, pero lo más importante también relacionado con la Agenda 2030. Y creo que es importante reconocer y articular toda esta agenda internacional que nos ha permitido, verdaderamente colocar el tema de las reivindicaciones de los derechos de los afrodescendientes en ese contexto. Entonces, esa agenda internacional, y es importante que en estos foros se pueda continuar haciendo un balance del progreso, de los desafíos que quedan, y aún más, que es algo que nosotros como Naciones Unidas seguimos trabajando con ustedes, articular los mecanismos de gobernanza, porque ahora hay un foro, el foro permanente, pero también a nivel regional nosotros tenemos el seguimiento, mecanismos de seguimiento de todos estos instrumentos y necesitamos articularlos. En particular el Fondo tiene el consenso de Montevideo de Población y Desarrollo, que es considerado el principal o el más avanzado instrumento de derechos y desarrollo en el mundo. Y nosotros tenemos un capítulo dentro de ese consenso de Montevideo que se relaciona con los derechos de las personas afrodescendientes. Ese mecanismo necesita una gobernanza desde el fondo. Hemos hablado que es importante tener ese mecanismo de gobernanza porque hemos logrado y avanzado en esta región a que todos los instrumentos, sobre todo los de población y desarrollo, tengan una contraparte en la gobernanza intergubernamental de las organizaciones de la sociedad civil y de los diferentes grupos, inclusive, por ejemplo, la discusión que habrá, el foro que habrá aquí con parlamentarios. De manera que sí, nosotros tenemos esa expectativa de estos foros y queremos que al final, a la vez de todos los resultados ya planteados por la vicepresidenta, podamos también avanzar en la construcción de esos mecanismos que permiten la formalización de la interacción con las organizaciones de afrodescendientes. Reafirmamos nuestro compromiso con esta agenda y al hacerlo lo hacemos en nombre del sistema. El fondo coyunturalmente, como dice la vicepresidenta, probablemente está un poco más empujando más fuerte, pero este es un trabajo, una obligación y un mandato que tienen todas las organizaciones del sistema de Naciones Unidas y esperamos que todos estemos a la altura para cumplir con ese desafío. De manera que entonces esperamos que en estos 3 días podamos avanzar lo suficiente en la construcción de esta agenda y como Fondo de Población quedamos a la espera de los resultados para seguir avanzando. Muchas gracias y que sea un foro muy fructífero. ¿Okay? Hasta luego.
Muchísimas gracias. Les agradecemos por continuar conectados al foro a acelerar la implementación de los compromisos internacionales para promover los derechos de las personas afrodescendientes para su reconocimiento, justicia y desarrollo. Muchísimas gracias también a todas las personas que están por acá presentes. Ahora quiero invitar a pasar acá al frente a la congresista Dorothy Davis, presidenta de la firma internacional de consultoría y gestión de proyectos de comunicaciones y asuntos públicos para el desarrollo. También es la representante del Congressional Black Caucus Institute ante las Naciones Unidas a través de su estatuto consultivo, responsable de dar forma a su iniciativa global de la diáspora africana. Es una organización de la sociedad civil que sirve como plataforma para las voces de los afroamericanos en apoyo de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible de las Naciones Unidas. Bienvenida y muchas gracias.
Her Excellency Epsi Campbell Barr, First Vice President of the Republic of Costa Rica. Dr. Michelle Bachelet, United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. Dr. Natalia Kanem, Executive Director, United Nations Population Fund. Her Excellency Ambassador Fatima Kiari Mohammed, Permanent Observer of the African Union to the United Nations. His Majesty Kwafu Akoto III, King of Akwamu, Ghana. Harold Robinson Davis, Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, United Nations Population Fund. Members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished dignitaries in the audience, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. What a joyous celebration we had last night, the first International Day for People of African Descent. It was spectacular. What an honor to be with you at this time. I stand before you today as a very proud woman of African descent. I also stand before you as the United Nations Economic and Social Council designee for the Congressional Black Caucus Institute. The Congressional Black Caucus Institute is a non-governmental organization and the policy, advocacy, and leadership training arm of the Congressional Black Caucus. As a member of ECOSOC, we stand on the shoulders of African Americans who were part of the founding American delegation at the signing of the United Nations Charter in San Francisco in 1945, and at the formation of what has become the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the guiding document of the Human Rights Council. So on behalf of the Congressional Black Caucus Institute, its chairman, Representative Benny Thompson of Mississippi, its executive director, Vanessa Gradine Jones, and African Americans of all walks of life across the world, I would like to begin by thanking the government of Costa Rica, and particularly First Vice President Epsi Campbell Barr, for initiating the resolution adopted by the UN General Assembly on December 28, 2020, proclaiming yesterday, August 31, as the International Day for People of African Descent. I would also like to thank the 52 member states for their support of this resolution. To further underscore collective support of this day, I am happy to inform you that Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California introduced a resolution in the U.S. House of Representatives proclaiming August 31st as International Day for People of African Descent in the United States of America. It's ironic that this commemoration coincided with voters' rights marches across the United States this past weekend in recognition of the 58th anniversary of the March on Washington and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. What an achievement we have collectively reached. Look how far we have come in our century's long walk to freedom, to paraphrase Nelson Mandela. We found a way to make a way out of no way through physical, psychological, and spiritual bondage to reach this mutual moment. Let's thank our ancestors for their fortitude, resilience, innovativeness, ingenuity, vision, brilliance, and determination to keep hope alive, in the words of Reverend Jesse Jackson, through the generations. Our collective walk toward freedom is one step closer to our vision of the future. This day firmly plants the journey of people of African descent in the soil of posterity. Every year going forward, the celebration of this day will remind us to recognize and respect the diverse heritage, culture, and contribution of people of African descent. It will help us recognize the development of integral societies and promote respect for human rights. It will also remind us to honor the fundamental freedoms of people of African descent. Let's start with recognizing the power of sustainable advocacy. While we cheer for the names we know, let's remember the untold waves of African men, women, and children who were ripped from their homes and families and indiscriminately shipped across the Atlantic Ocean from the doors of no return of Gorée Island of Senegal, Cape Coast Castle of Ghana, and Ouidah of Benin, the most important embarkation point for the enslaved in the region of West Africa between the 17th and the 19th centuries. While crossing the Middle Passage, they died of hunger, disease, depression, fear, cruelty, and more. Some chose freedom through death. It is those whose bones still lay at the bottom of the ocean, whom playwright August Wilson refers to in the dialogue between his characters, Aunt Esther and Mr. Citizen, in his award-winning play, Gem of the Ocean. They coming across the water, 10,000 hands and feet coming across the water. They on their way. I came across that ocean, Mr. Citizen. I cried. I had lost everything. Everything I had ever known in this life, I lost that. I cried an ocean of tears. Did you ever lose anything like that, Mr. Citizen? Were you so lost the only thing that can guide you is the stars? That's all I had left. Those who survived the Middle Passage and arrived on the shores of unknown lands were stripped of their cultures, religions, languages, traditions, currencies, foods, family names, livelihoods, social status, and familiar environment. Their talents, experience, wisdom, leadership, and skills were used to build the wealth and empires of strangers in strange lands. As their remuneration, they were forced to live in inhuman conditions of unconscionable depths. Those were our enslaved ancestors. But we also recognize that while the enslaved were being snatched from Africa to the Americas, Europe was introducing colonialism to Africa. Through random and selfish acts of redesigning the continent into newly constructed countries, they ignored the centuries-old cultures and socio-ecosystems our ancestors had established. At the signing of the UN Charter in San Francisco in 1945, Liberia, Ethiopia, and South Africa were the only non-colonized African countries to sign it. However, South Africa was operating under the apartheid system. Haiti and the Dominican Republic were the only non-colonized countries from the Caribbean who signed it. Yet the underground fight for freedom from colonialism across Africa was already afoot. The history of colonialism is well documented. I only want to highlight that the initial godfathers of the independence movement of Africa were President William B.S. Tubman of Liberia and His Royal Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia. In January 1953, then Prime Minister of the Gold Coast, Kwame Nkrumah, made an official visit to Liberia at the invitation of President Tubman. My parents had arrived in Liberia a few months earlier on their first tour of duty as a Foreign Service family. Since my father was the first audiovisual advisor at U.S. Embassy Monrovia, President Tubman arranged with the first African-American U.S. ambassador, Edward R. Dudley, for my dad to go to Accra and accompany Prime Minister Nkrumah and his entourage on the ship back to Monrovia. My dad officially documented the historic trip and visit of Kwame Nkrumah to Liberia in photographs and a story in Ebony magazine. When Ghana celebrated its first Independence Day on March 7th, 1957, my father was sent from his post in Liberia by U.S. Information Agency to be the official photographer for the U.S. delegation to the Independence Day ceremonies in Accra, led by then Vice President Richard Nixon. A future congressman was in that delegation. His name was Charles Diggs. He started the subcommittee on Africa. It was during a reception in Accra that my father took the iconic photograph of the first meeting between Vice President Nixon and Martin Luther King Jr., flanked by their respective wives, Patricia Nixon and Coretta Scott King. It was at that time that Nixon invited Martin Luther King Jr. to meet him in Washington, D.C. The Kings had just completed the Montgomery bus boycott a few months earlier. They were invited to attend the Independence Day celebration by Ghana's first president, Kwame Nkrumah. By May 25th, 1963, the Organization of African Unity was formed as an intergovernmental organization for the purpose of ridding the continent of the remaining vestiges of colonization and apartheid, and to promote unity and solidarity amongst African states. Having accomplished its primary goal with the dismantling of apartheid in South Africa in 1994, the OAU transformed into the African Union in 2002. Today, we honor the men and women who were involved in the fight for civil rights and against colonialism and apartheid. In the United States, this includes the names of men and women and children we shout out when we say Black Lives Matter. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Amadou Diallo, Philando Castile, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland, and countless others who should be here today celebrating with us. Let us not forget to also cheer for everyday people who have been foot soldiers in this war like our own family members. Our great-grandma and great-grandpa, our grandma and grandpa, our mom and dad, our aunties and uncles, our brothers and sisters, our neighbors down the street. They are all part of the historical lineage of unsung heroes and heroine brigades. This has been and continues to be our collective legacy of sustainable advocacy. I challenge you to help build this legacy going forward. We owe it to our future generations if we are to eradicate enduring legacies of slavery, colonialism, apartheid, such as racism and discrimination. Today, as many as 1.6 billion people identify themselves as part of the worldwide African diaspora, including as many as 200 million in the Americas. As many as 67% of residents of the Caribbean are of African descent. As many as 46.8 million people in the United States identify themselves as Black or African American and have continually made important contributions to the political, economic, sociocultural development of the United States. Over the last 6 years, we've been living in the International Decade for People of African Descent, as proclaimed by the General Assembly in 2014. The international community has continually recognized people of African descent whose human rights must be promoted and protected. In fact, the President of the General Assembly hosted the midterm review of the International Decade for People of African Descent on July 22nd. We began this critical decade by unveiling the Ark of Return on March 25th, 2015, a permanent memorial to honor the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. U.S. Congresswoman Barbara Lee secured the U.S. government contribution for the completion of the Ark of Return. The date also marked the International Day of Remembrance of the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. On that blistering cold day, Jamaica's former Prime Minister, Portia Simpson Miller, joined Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, then UN General Assembly President Sam Kutesa of Uganda, Ambassador Tete Antonio, the predecessor of Ambassador Mohammed as the African Union Permanent Observer to the UN, member states, and the late former first African-American mayor of New York City, David N. Dinkins, in the formal program to unveil the memorial. I stood in the audience witnessing this historic moment. Designed by Haitian-American architect Rodney Leon, the memorial stands at the visitor's entrance to UN headquarters in New York City for the world to perpetually remember and honor the more than 18 million victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade forced from Africa to the Americas, including the Caribbean and Europe. Acknowledge the tragedy is the first element of the Ark of Return, a map highlighting the African continent at the center of the slave trade, illustrating the complexity and impact at a global scale. The second element, Consider the Legacy, features a full-scale human replica carved out of Black Zimbabwean granite to represent the spirit of the men, women, and children who lost their lives. And the third element, Lest We Forget, offers a reflecting pool for visitors to honor the memory of the millions of souls lost. The Ark of Return is a tribute to the courage of enslaved people, abolitionists, and unsung heroes who helped end the oppression of slavery. The installation is considered to be one of the most important contributions of the entire International Decade for People of African Descent. And today, we add another significant contribution by celebrating the first International Day for People of African Descent. The permanent memorial was an outgrowth of the Durban Declaration and Program of Action of the 2001 World Conference on Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerance, held under the tenure of then Secretary General Kofi Annan in Durban, South Africa. The following U.S. congresspersons attended the World Conference on Racism as observers: the late Congressman John Conyers, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, and then Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney. I too attended the World Conference on Racism as a member of the UNDP delegation. According to the Durban Declaration, I quote, "The conference agreed that slavery and the slave trade are a crime against humanity and should have always been so. It was further agreed that slavery and the slave trade were appalling tragedies in the history of humanity, especially in their negation of the essence of the victims. The conference also recognized that colonialism had led to racism and caused suffering, and that its consequences persisted to this day. 5 years before the 2001 World Conference on Racism, then Deputy President Thabo Mbeki of South Africa, under the presidency of Nelson Mandela, gave a seminal speech entitled "I Am an African" on the occasion of the passing of the new Constitution of South Africa. With the end of apartheid, this historic moment represented the full independence of the entire African continent. I listened to his speech while sitting in a cab in Pretoria that day. It was spellbinding. He ended it by saying, quote, "This thing that we have done today in this small corner of a great continent that has contributed so decisively to the evolution of humanity says that Africa reaffirms that she is continuing her rise from the ashes. Whatever the setbacks of the moment, nothing can stop us now. Whatever the difficulties, Africa shall be at peace. However improbable it may sound to the skeptics, Africa will prosper." The African Union later adopted that phrase, "I am an African," as the slogan for their global communications campaign. For me, the 1921 poem, "The Negro Speaks of Rivers" by Harlem Renaissance writer Langston Hughes, powerfully captures the African diaspora's core umbilical cord relationship to Africa in spite of the variety of traversed rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. One African tradition that survived the Middle Passage was that of the griot. Those who arrived on new shores brought with them the memory of what freedom had been in their native country. It was a gift that kept on giving through the generations. I believe they embedded those stories of freedom in the minds and souls of the enslaved to instill hope in future generations. Ebony magazine and the tributaries of the Black press served as the modern-day griot and internet during the Jim Crow, colonialism, and apartheid eras. They documented and shared the stories of the U.S. Civil Rights Movement with those of the independence movement in Africa. Former liberation movement leaders turned heads of state of African nations confirmed that premise. Today, it's the in real-time immediacy of the internet via the proliferation of cell phones. That's how we globally watched the continuously revolving and expanding cycles of COVID-19 and defiant Black Lives Matter demonstrations as they mushroomed across the US after each police brutality incident. The collage of these, at first, seemed to be random acts of violence being met with the extreme retaliation of the police. Yet the repetition of these incidents eventually revealed to the world a systemic pattern of racism and racial injustice. George Floyd's elongated murder over 9 minutes and 26 seconds on May 25th, 2020, ignited the suppressed global rage stemming from the residue of legacies that started with slavery. As is stated in the resolution entered into the U.S. Congressional Record yesterday by Congresswoman Barbara Lee, this was the point when, quote, "the COVID-19 pandemic exposed the intersectional and compounded forms of racial discrimination, marginalization, and exclusion experienced by people of African descent." It goes on to say, quote, "The murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and other African Americans in the United States catalyzed people around the world to protest racism and prompted a global reckoning on racial justice." So this brings us to the issue of justice. In response to George Floyd's murder, CBCI spearheaded a joint public statement of outrage against police brutality on Juneteenth, 2020, with our fellow African American ECOSOC consultative status member organizations. We were really encouraged by the expression of solidarity exemplified by the Africa Group of the Human Rights Council and the extraordinary global multiracial outrage and demand for justice. CBCI welcomes the release by United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, of the report on systemic racism and police brutality against Africans and people of African descent at the hands of law enforcement around the world after examining 62 countries, including the United States. We further support her global call to action at the time of the report's release by saying that there is, quote, an urgent need to confront the legacies of enslavement, the transatlantic slave trade, colonialism, and successive racially discriminatory policies and systems, and to seek reparatory justice. We also support the following resolution introduced in the U.S. House of Representatives by Congresswoman Barbara Lee, proclaiming August 31st as International Day for People of African Descent in the United States. It reads, "Be it resolved," and there are 6 points. "Be it resolved that the House of Representatives, 1, celebrates the goals and ideals of the first International Day for People of African Descent, particularly the principle that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights and have the potential to contribute constructively to the development and well-being of their societies. 2, condemns any doctrine of racial superiority as scientifically and empirically false, morally condemnable, socially unjust, and dangerous to democracy everywhere, and calls for its rejection, together with theories that attempt to determine the existence of separate human races. 3, strongly condemns the continuing violent practices and excessive use of force by law enforcement agencies against Africans and people of African descent, and condemns structural racism in criminal justice systems in the United States and around the world. 4, acknowledges the transatlantic slave trade as one of the darkest chapters in our human history and upholds human dignity and equality for the victims of slavery, the slave trade, and colonialism, in particular people of African descent in the African diaspora. 5, commits to pursue a legislative agenda to eliminate the persistent racial inequities here in the United States in education, healthcare, housing, jobs, wages, Social Security and veteran benefits, land ownership, financial assistance, food security, voting rights, and the justice system. And finally, number 6, stands in solidarity with people of African descent across the diaspora against systemic racism and supports the transformational agenda for racial justice and equality as identified in the Systemic Racism Report and implemented through the subsequent Human Rights Council resolution, informally referred to as the George Floyd Resolution, and the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. The urgency to implement the recommendations of the Global Systemic Racism Report extends to each of our national levels. It is now our mandate. In the United States, members of the Congressional Black Caucus are doing so in the following ways. Congressman Benny Thompson of Mississippi is the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Institute. He is also the current chair of the House Homeland Security Committee and was recently appointed chair of the House Select Committee on the January 6th insurrection, fighting issues of white supremacy. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas has led the charge in moving H.R. 40, a bill to establish a commission to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans through the legislative process. Congresswoman Barbara Lee and Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey sponsored a resolution to establish a national commission on truth, racial healing, and transformation. This commission will educate and inform the public about the historical context for current racial inequality. Congresswoman Terry Sewell of Alabama was the lead sponsor of the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act that recently passed the House of Representatives. It restores critical protections to voting rights. Congressman G.K. Butterfield of North Carolina is chairman of the House Administration's Subcommittee on Elections. Congresswoman Karen Bass of California and Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey sponsored the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. It addresses a wide range of policies and issues regarding policing practices and law enforcement accountability. As for the area of development, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought the racial, health, and gender disparities of our societies crashing to the surface of our collective consciousness. It has also crystallized our global interdependency as human beings and as nations. Its domino effect across all of the Sustainable Development Goals has severely undermined our previous successes and revealed the frailties of our development systems. It has forced all of us to become innovative, resilient, and patient against all odds as we meet each new and interwoven challenge in this very fluid environment. We all know that there's a huge divide in the availability and distribution of vaccines for everyone globally. Africa and the Caribbean are among the hardest hit by COVID. While addressing these issues at the national level, the Congressional Black Caucus is keenly aware and committed to pushing the U.S. government and its allies towards greater access, as well as partnering with the African diaspora in finding viable solutions. Climate change is also further complicating and devastating our way of life. The recent earthquake in Haiti, the devastation of Hurricane Ida in New Orleans, and the fires in California, the floods in Europe and across the world are signs of the frailty of our planet. We are all trying to find solutions to ever more complex problems. Here are a few examples of the initiatives being made by the Congressional Black Caucus in partnership with the African diaspora around development. Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Chair of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on State, Foreign Operations, and Related Programs, and Congresswoman Karen Bass, Chair of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Africa, Global Health, and Global Human Rights, joined by an additional 13 Congressional Black Caucus members, sent a letter calling on the administration to donate and urge other countries to donate 100 million additional vaccines to African nations. African nations have received 19.7 million U.S. vaccine donations, yet only 2% of Africans have been fully vaccinated for COVID-19. Africa has the highest COVID-19 death rate in the world, and COVID-19 infections are rapidly increasing due to the emergence of the Delta variant and a lack of vaccines and public health resources. Congressman Gregory Meeks of New York, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He is working with congressional colleagues, including Representative Yvette Clarke, Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, and many others to aggressively push the United States to lead in providing access to vaccines for African and Caribbean countries. We gather here today as the residue, in conclusion, we gather here today as the residue of all these disparate routes people of African descent have traveled over the centuries. It has been and is a very personal and painful journey for all of us. CBCI established the Initiative for the Global African Diaspora to provide context for the diaspora and the world about the realities of people of African descent within the United States. CBCI is the platform for the voices of African Americans within the African diaspora at the UN in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. In that racism impacts all of the Sustainable Development Goals, CBCI strives to educate how it contributes to disparities and work towards eradicating those disparities in the United States and through partnerships across the African diaspora. CBCI looks forward to collaborating with other civil society organizations in implementing the Systemic Racism Report, the George Floyd Resolution, the establishment of the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, and recognizing the 20th anniversary of the Durban Declaration and Program of Action on September 22nd at the national, state, and local levels. Let me leave you with the groundbreaking and wise words of Maya Angelou, "Still I rise. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air, I'll rise. I rise, I rise, I rise."
Muchas gracias, Dorothy, por tan representantes palabras para nuestra población afrodescendiente. Muchísimas gracias a todas las personas que nos siguen acompañando en este foro que es en conmemoración del Día Internacional de los Afrodescendientes, reafirmando el compromiso con la población afrodescendiente por su reconocimiento, justicia y desarrollo. Ahora quiero invitar a las siguientes personas que van a estar participando del panel, a la señora Fátima Kiari Mohamed. Adelante a que nos acompañe por acá en el podio. También a la señora Amo Aziza. Y al rey Onedejo Kwafu Okoto III. Quiero darle ahora las palabras a la señora Fátima Kiari. La señora Mohamed tiene una maestría en paz, seguridad, desarrollo y transformación de conflictos de la Universidad de Innsbruck, Austria, así como una maestría en desarrollo económico sostenible de la Universidad de la Paz de las Naciones Unidas. Además, tiene una maestría en administración de empresas de la Universidad Europea y una licenciatura en diseño ambiental de la Universidad Ahmadu Bello, Nigeria. Adelante.
Can you hear me? Great. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I apologize for the slight confusion. I actually thought I was making closing remarks. but that's fine. This is even better. Your Majesty, Madam Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, greetings to all joining us here in the hall and also online, and permit me to stand on existing protocols. It's a particular honor for me to be here with you this morning and to be able to attend this historic event. First as a representative of the African Union, but also particularly because of this theme. And actually being here in Costa Rica is particularly poignant for me because exactly a decade ago I was here in this beautiful country. And I spent an incredible year at the UN University for Peace. And I actually recall that was the year of the International Year for People of African Descent. And for the first time, I had actually attended an event that was organized by the Circle of Afro-Descendant Youth. So I would say it's a pretty good coincidence. And it's really, truly an honor. That said, let me start by saying a big thank you to Madam Vice President and through her to the government of Costa Rica for the warm welcome, for the hospitality, for hosting us, and of course to all the partners, particularly the UN and UNFPA for bringing us together to this historic event. This first commemoration and the various events being organized throughout the week mean a lot of things for many people, but particularly I think for us as Africans and Afro-descendants. I think the first is the reaffirmation of the global commitment of people of African descent while recognizing the need for justice and development. With the declaration by the United Nations General Assembly on August 31st as the International Day for People of African Descent, this has brought to light more the need to promote respect, culture, and the diverse heritage, and more importantly, the contribution of people of African descent to the development of different communities and nations worldwide. Many governments have also adopted progressive legislative and administrative measures to effectively combat racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance since the adoption of the Durban Declaration and Program of Action. Now, while we recognize that progress has been made, we're conscious of the fact that racial prejudices and discrimination that people of African descent still face today, still continue to face today, regardless of these policies. And this recognition means that there is a consciousness that's being raised by the international community, and that action is being taken where it was not before. We therefore have a responsibility to continue to build this consciousness and to continue to raise awareness. Because it's only by educating both ourselves and others that we can change the narrative and change the reality of discrimination faced by our brothers and sisters on the continent and around the world. The second point that I'd like to underline is that there is more respect and acknowledgement for the knowledge and contribution for people of African descent in their economies, in the global community, and humanity as a whole. And the United Nations General Assembly, having adopted by consensus this resolution, I think is a major step in this regard. And I recognize the role of my sister Ambassador Aziza during this whole process. Today we heard the passionate speech by Madam Vice President, and this was reinforced by our keynote speaker about the need to urge that these commitments be put into action by all. And I think this is an obligation. It is a human obligation, and we must all play our part. So before I conclude, let me just underline very quickly from the African Union perspective a couple of things. First is that in 2003, the African Union Summit of Heads of States decided to recognize the African diaspora as the sixth region of Africa, and this exists in the Constitution of the African Union. And we also have at the African Union Commission a dedicated department that works on mainstreaming diaspora participation in the African Union agenda across all departments. There are a number of partnership frameworks and a wide range of policy activity, including our Continental Development Agenda, which is Agenda 2063. So I would like to just conclude here, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, by just echoing the need for us to promote and to continue to build on the efforts so far, to recognize the government of Costa Rica for its dedication in promoting this commemorative day and week and the overall promotion of respect of human rights and fundamental freedoms for people of African descent in particular. I'd also obviously like to thank all the delegates and participants that have participated today. Democracy, transparency, responsibility, accountability, and a government that is responsive to the needs and aspirations of a people and respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms is a government for the people. And there must be effective prevention and elimination of racism, racial discrimination and xenophobia, and related intolerance across the board. It simply should not exist. So let's continue to dialogue amongst peoples. Let's continue to attain the identification and promotion of common grounds. Let's continue to promote the inherent dignity and equal rights of all human beings and respect for fundamental principles of justice. This is the only way we can dispel notions of superiority based on skin color or culture or any other related intolerance. We must continue the advocacy, the education, and the sensitization towards building peace and reconciliation across the world. I thank you.
Muchas gracias, Dorothy. Muchas gracias, Fátima, Carrie. Queremos agradecerles a todas las personas que tenemos conectadas desde la plataforma, que nos reportan que tenemos a más de 300 personas en línea, y también a las personas que nos acompañan acá presencialmente. Ahora quiero darle las palabras al rey Onedejo Cuafo Okoto III, que es el jefe supremo del área tradicional de Umatu, que es un estado establecido por el pueblo en la actual Ghana. La capital del estado de Umatu se llama Akumufi.
When a man stamps his feet on conflict, he stumbles. He pleads the voices of the 13,000s, and he is the new song which was sung in the tomb. When I gaze at the sun, it refreshes the morning dew with tears, dawning on me the change that carry the itineraries. I heard this sound from the chaperone. You're a monkey. You are an animal. I saw the boys carrying their tears in their eyes, the men striving from the deepest part of the heart. And I said, African is gold. African is black. Black is star. My Lord, permit me to voice out some part of your history. From the book of Archives in the year 1733, November 23, about 150 men from Akwemu, present-day Ghana, fought and conquered the masters and owners of that West Indies, presently known as the St. John's American Virgin Islands. This shows the unity and the strength of Africa. And this was believed to be the earliest and longest war between the African man and his oppressor. A man who needs no introduction. He is called the flint that sparks of trouble. Divine drummer of the mighty one who hails from time immemorial. Who will say he is the Tolampoma, the drummer? Akotos, whose name befits his fame, the one who is sought before decisions are taken. My Lord, before you advances, first look behind you, for the road is crooked, very, very crooked. If you have saved me, then save Africa too. For it is you who by Kanem killed Ashwabeng at Kwabianketia. The forth bearers claim they didn't see you. The back bearers claim they didn't see you. By the middle bearer says, there you go. For if I should follow you today, I shall exhaust my gunpowder. Long live my Lord. Long live Ghana. Long live Costa Rica. Long live Africa. Thank you.
Damasio, Aquanenkunam, or the Shaninkunam Nadias, Nasu Biafra, Yehu. Aye, or could you see, Madame?
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you very much. Miss Epsi Campbell Barr, the first Vice President of the Republic of Costa Rica. Mr. Harold Robinson Davis, Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, United Nations Population Fund. Allegra Bauchi, Resident Coordinator of UNA in Costa Rica. Ms. Dorothy Davis, Representative of the United Nations. Her Excellency Fatima Kari Mohammed, African Union Representative to the United Nations. Mr. Ojo Lape, UNPF Country Director for Ghana. My Honorable Evis Morris Donko, Member of Parliament, Ghana.
Honorable Marco Krikumante, the Deputy Minister for Tourism and Culture, Ghana. Ladies and gentlemen, all other protocol observed. On this momentous day, an occasion of the forum of the first International Day for People of African Descent, I bring you greetings and warm felicitation from the people of Ghana and from the continent of Africa. In doing that, I want to seize this opportunity to join every one of our brothers and sisters of African descent all over the world to acknowledge and celebrate the invaluable labor and contributions that we all make in the global space. We are noblemen and we are royals, as you know. As you know, the contribution of people of African descent is not just a contemporary phenomenon. It dates back to hundreds of years ago, during and even before the dark history of slave trade in the world. We must therefore use this occasion to proudly acknowledge the rich legacies of a past of the extraordinary contributions by the African diaspora all over the world. We must celebrate with a view to once and for all permanently remove every obstacle to the recognition of every individual as freely born with equal rights and dignity, both in deed, action, and commitment. In short, I want us to use this occasion to say a permanent no to every form of racism and discrimination in today's world. I will urge people of African descent, as I have always said, that we should take advantage of the educational systems in the world and go to school, because that is the only way people of African descent can be heard in the world. I speak on behalf of the Ghanaian population, and indeed all Africans, to condemn every form of violence, as well as systemic and structural discrimination that currently exists in the world. This is the only way in which we can right the wrongs of the past and uphold human dignity and equality for the residual efforts of slavery and colonialism, especially with regards to the people of African descent in the African diaspora. I also, on behalf of African traditional leaders, wish to welcome the establishment of the United Nations Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, which will be a standing forum to amplify the voices of people of African descent globally. Against the background of our past, I believe that we will be able to leverage on the current momentum of fashion out concrete actions that will have the voices of people of African descent in the center of governance and decision making. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the government and people of Costa Rica, the United Nations systems, and in particular the leadership in the United Nations Population Fund for hosting this very important celebration and bringing all of us together for this momentous landmark in history. I look forward to continue working with you for the ideal objectives that has been set out for this occasion. I wish all of you a successful deliberation today. Welcome to Costa Rica. I know you are enjoying it as I am enjoying it too here. Let us have fun. And I brought you a lot of chocolate from Ghana. You know, Ghana have one of the best chocolates in the world because we produce a lot of cocoa. You know, I'll urge everybody to take the COVID-19 pandemic seriously and adhere to proper protocols so together we can eradicate this common enemy that has made life uncomfortable in the world. Thank you very much. Mucho gracias.
Muchas gracias al rey Onedejo Akwafu Akoto III. Ahora quiero darle, para finalizar, las palabras a Amo Aziza, quien fue ministra de Salud durante la presidencia de Idris Deby en 2019. También fue embajadora del Chad en la Unión Europea, el Reino Unido y los países de Benelux. Adelante.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. That's better. Thank you, all of you, and Excellency, Madam Vice President of the Republic of Costa Rica, Excellencies, Permanent Representative of African Union to the United Nations, Madam Fatima Kiari, and distinguished participant, all protocol observed. It is really an honor and also a duty for me to be here today, celebrating with the people of Costa Rica the first commemoration of the International Day of People of African Descent. At that stage, I would like to congratulate, to thank, and also to encourage the government of Costa Rica for the engagement on the cause of the people of African descent. Chad is far away, somewhere in Africa, representing one of the multiple figures and specificities of Africa, and we are committed to the same cause with Costa Rica and all of you here today. It is a matter of rights of people. It is a matter of justice for people, and it is a matter just of visibility for people who have marked the history of the humanity, who did a lot and who continue to do, to contribute to perform that humanity. But today we have to commemorate, we have to be together to raise the presence, to raise the problem faced with by this portion of population in the world. So that last night I was with you at this reception, which was very brilliant and very rich. And someone from Puerto Rico mentioned something important that I would like to share with you. He said that here in this area of the world, which is the Caribbean, generally speaking, and the Central America, we are diverse because we have been influenced by British, Portuguese, French, and others. And sorry. And we, as the result, we are very, very different with languages, with tradition, with habits, and everything. But somewhere, we have one point that we share, and which is non-discutable, which is our roots of African. This commitment to Africa, this culture of Africa, and this faraway conscience of that we belong to that motherland, Africa. And this is very important to notice, and for me, it is the meaning of a lot. So if I'm here from far away, it is also to say that my country, even if the history is different, we are sharing the same problem, the same challenges, and the same hope. And this is why I'm very proud to be here, part of this very important ceremony. I will leave certainly in a couple of days, but I will go with 4 very important words, which are emotion, memory, challenge, and hope. Emotion because of this commitment. Emotion because of we are very different, but we are one. Emotion of that, certainly our past, our common past, is still present, and this is what it's guiding us. Memory is just to mention that we are not coming from elsewhere. No. Your Majesty, you are here representing this very deep, ancient portion of our history, which is remaining present and which is guiding us. Those values, those principles, and those references is also our pride. And this is why I can say that our memory is important, and we know that we are not coming from elsewhere, but we are coming from somewhere, and which is important. Our memory is also all those fights, which are personal, but which are also from groups, which are also from communities, from countries, like today, what is done by Costa Rica under the leadership of Madam Vice President. And those fights also bring us to know that, and to mention, and to get that very important power that we could go more and more further. The achievements are very important. We cannot just list that today, but for sure we did a lot together, and we will continue to do. And this is our challenge. This challenge also is not just because of the general environment, but this challenge is also the fact that the last 10 years we witnessed it, we saw how we could do when we are all working together, standing together. Those last 10 years, the achievements are so important that just I could take from the Durban Declaration up to today, we can say that we are on the right path. We are on the good path. But we also have now to notice that what we realize is opening more and more doors, saying to us that what is coming is, again, very important and bigger than what we have achieved. And with this permanent forum that we achieved last month, questions are opened. We have to move now and today to make all this become true, become a kind of, to become something that we can experience right now, not to let it disappear into conferences and discussions, but we can just go and jump into actions, and that are our challenges. And the hope is that, and the last word, the hope. The hope is what I notice as engagement. Engagement starting by myself. Few months ago, I must recognize that before the PGA called for me to be with Costa Rica to co-preside the forum and this discussion around the forum, my knowledge and my conscience about the problem and the issue was different. And today I can say that I'm stronger, and I can say also that my kids that I brought with me here to know and to understand could have their word to say and could have their share to bring, because this is the generation who will do more than what we did. So this engagement is very important, and I notice also the presence, I'm sorry for the male, the presence of women, very strong women. Mrs. Bachelet, Mrs. Amina Mohammed, Mrs. Kanem, and Mrs. Campbell, and all of you here, I can notice the presence and the commitment and the engagement of women. And when we have women at the front, I can tell you things could become different. And this is the note of hope that I could just say, and we have to build around it and to continue what we started far away before, but now we can say that we are witnessing something. The group yesterday presented the Calypso. I was looking at them and I was saying, wow, those four senior, they certainly faced a lot, but to standing last night with us, sharing with us this history, this memory of Calypso, and it is something like they are giving us now the mission to continue, and we have also to give that mission to our kids. I saw Madam Campbell coming with her little kid, little one, the little daughter, and I was so happy to see that, because this is the way we have to continue, because the march is still long. And thank you, all of you, and I'm just, before closing, just to share what Chad could do in this battle, and this different battle that we have. It is, of course, we are far away, but we are so close in the same time. And this is just the message that I would like to deliver. And thank you, all of you, for being there and being together, sharing those moments with us. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias. Así queremos finalizar este panel tan enriquecedor, acelerando la implementación de los compromisos internacionales para promover los derechos de las personas afrodescendientes, para su reconocimiento, justicia y desarrollo. Muchas gracias a todas las personas que nos acompañaron, tanto acá vía presencial como vía virtual. Cerramos este panel agradeciéndoles a todos y todas por el tiempo. Para el siguiente panel vamos a acomodar por acá a las personas que nos van a estar acompañando, entonces les invito a pasar a la parte de atrás para que puedan tomar un coffee break. Muchas gracias.
Please, you can join us for the coffee break on the back, on the main entrance.